We're going to be talking about the top 5 ways to get ready for Call of Duty Modern Warfare. Keep in mind that although a lot of these tips are great from switching from one COD to another, regardless of what Call of Duty you plan to play in 2019 to 2020, these tips will still be helpful. If you enjoyed the video or find it helpful in any way, please do me a favor and hit that like button. And if you're looking to find your way back for more Call of Duty content, make sure you do subscribe with notifications on. So these are just a few of the different things that I plan to talk about within the video, but what we'll focus on first is this top section that I think a lot of people get caught up in, and this is figuring out the right Call of Duty to play to get ready for the next Call of Duty. And more often than not, somebody will tell you, you gotta go back and play Modern Warfare 2, you gotta play Modern Warfare 3, you gotta play Ghost. And for the most part, if you actually focus on the fundamentals, really any COD will work. And a great reason why BO4 is a good option for you is because it has predictive recoil, which is only in Black Ops 4 and Modern Warfare. Of course, there's plenty of other games out there that have done predictive recoil for a while and will continue to do predictive recoil. But when it comes to Call of Duty, there's only been 2 games that have actually done predictive recoil, and that is Black Ops 4 and the brand new Modern Warfare. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about predictive recoil later on in the video. The other thing is the general options when it comes to different sensitivity settings, the overall HUD, and the other good part about Black Ops 4 is that it has a very long time to kill, pretty much the longest in the entire series. And the main reason that's good for the player is because when you have to land more shots, you tend to have to be a little bit more accurate, or you're going to lose those gunfights. And that's actually often the #1 complaint from hardcore players, is that you have to land so many shots to kill somebody, but if you're pretty accurate, then landing shots shouldn't be an issue. So the key is to work on that. I'm going to talk about a few different strategies throughout the video in terms of improving your accuracy and working on that predictive recoil and overall recoil management. So this next part is primarily for controller players. It's a great time to switch up your controller layout. In case you guys didn't know, there's several different options. There's stick and move, tactical, bumper jumper tactical, and you can even experiment with doing flip triggers so that your R1 and L1 or your RB and LB are actually your aim down sight and your trigger, and they kind of switch with your actual triggers. I would say that the vast majority of players leave it on default, never touch it, but there are advantages to using these different layouts, and the most advantageous or the most popular in terms of usage outside of the default is the tactical layout. And pretty much what you're going to get out of having the tactical layout is it's going to swap your crouch and prone with your melee buttons. So anytime you're actually going to go ahead and slide, go crouch or prone, you can go ahead and maintain control of your aim. And in addition to that, that's going to reduce a lot of those panic melees that you can do unintentionally just out of habit. So even though I spent a good amount of time on the tactical layout, I highly recommend reading through the various different options that I listed and see which one works best for you. And this is ideally the best time to learn, so you can go ahead and go through trial and error and really start to make it part of your muscle memory, so that by the time Modern Warfare actually comes out, you're going to be used to that particular layout instead of waiting till the game actually comes out and then watching some kind of best settings guide where somebody goes over that particular tip, and then you go ahead and try it, and then you got to relearn your button layout while you're learning the game. And the next thing I recommend doing is learning to maximize the minimap. And I think a lot of people make mistakes with this one because they oversimplify what the minimap does, and they don't quite understand all the different nuances. So because of that, what you end up having is a bunch of people that don't even use the minimap because they don't think it's useful unless there's a UAV. So you could basically chase red dots, but that's probably the least useful thing you actually get from the minimap. So the thing with the UAV is it doesn't last very long. Obviously 30 seconds sounds like it's long, but you're really only getting 5 sweeps out of that UAV. And since it doesn't work in real time, you're basically getting 5 different snapshots over a 30-second time period. So in reality, you're probably really getting 10, 12 seconds out of that UAV. And when you're only getting about 3 or 4 UAVs in an entire match, you're talking about 50 seconds over maybe a 7-minute match, which is pretty tiny. So what do you got to do for that other 90%? You got to understand how to utilize that minimap so you can actually maximize the minimap and get more kills and limit some of those deaths. So a couple of the main things that you got to be aware of is where the spawns are. Typically, how you figure out where the enemy spawns are is they're going to be on the opposite end of where your teammates are spawning. If you're looking at the minimap and you see a bunch of blue triangles or whatever color you have it set in your settings, you're going to go ahead and see them pop up in a specific area, and you know, okay, my teammates are spawning there, the enemies are typically going to be spawning in the opposite side of the map. You kind of have a prediction of where the enemies will be coming from. So the other part of the mini map is looking for all the different voids, and what I mean by that is you kind of know where the hot areas are on specific maps. And for the vast majority of maps, there's about 3 or 4 areas where people tend to gravitate towards. What you're going to look at is on the minimap, you're going to look in those specific areas. And what will happen is if there's no teammates in that specific area, and you can see some of your teammates are in some of those other high traffic areas, you can almost assume that an enemy is going to be there. In addition to that, let's say one of your teammates is in one of those high traffic areas, and then all of a sudden their triangle just disappears. If you happen to see that, then you know, hey, you know what, they got in a gunfight, so an enemy is probably in that area. Most of the time, you're also going to see a death skull, so you can kind of have an indication of where an enemy is located. Another great thing about the minimap is you can see what direction your teammates are facing. So if they're holding a particular lane, you know that you can hold an opposite lane so that you guys are covering all those different areas. So you're less likely to get flanked or to just get randomly shot in the back. And probably one of the least talked about, but one of the most effective tools when it comes to the mini map is reading the coverage of the map. And pretty much how that works is in your head, you kind of have an overhead view of the entire map. You kind of have a line through the middle, and what you're looking for is how many teammates are on each side of that line. When you end up having too many teammates on one side of the line, you can almost expect the spawns to flip. And this is typically done by a little bit higher skilled players, because what they do is they kind of predict the spawn flip before it actually happens. So they can get in position, get a few easy kills, and since they're the only one in that area, they should be able to rack up a ton of kills if they're able to win those gunfights. And that's going to bring us to tips 4 and 5, which are to improve your accuracy and then overall recoil management. So the first part when it comes to having good accuracy is finding the right sensitivity. I have a full tutorial on that where you kind of run around custom matches using a hipfire only weapon, so you can find the right sensitivity where you're not missing a ton of shots. And pretty much what happens is you're building on top of your accuracy. So the next thing you'd want to focus on is your overall centering. And I think centering is one of those things you really have to work on. I have a big issue with consistency with this. When I really try to focus on it, it's pretty perfect, and then outside of that, sometimes it just gets sloppy. So again, this is one of those behaviors you got to constantly work on, because as you play on different maps with different weapons, the centering changes up slightly. And for anyone unfamiliar with what centering is, it's basically a technique that allows you to line up your shot before you aim down sight. So basically, as you come around the corner, maybe you get in a habit of putting your crosshairs towards the middle of a doorway. So if someone happens to be coming through there, you can just aim down sight and pull the trigger. For the most part, if you look at some of your old gameplay, what you'll notice is you're either too high, too low, too far to the right, or too far to the left. And more often than not, you're not really practicing good centering. So it's always a good habit to get into, and not really one that you could ever get too good at. So one other part that I didn't put on the list that's related to this is that you kind of chain together. You're gonna have the right sensitivity, then you have the right centering, but then you also have to work on snap aim. And what that typically means is, let's say you go ahead and start shooting at someone and then you see another enemy. Instead of dragging your crosshairs across the screen while you're aiming down sight, what you do is release your aim down sight. Then what you're going to want to do is make sure you center or snap onto the next target while aiming down sight, so you can be as accurate as possible. And pretty much this is a little bit more effective for a couple different reasons. If you're releasing your aim down sight and then you're snapping back on the target, it'll be a little bit harder for them to break your strafe and your aim assist that you typically are going to get with the controller. And the other part, it's just a good habit to be in because it's a lot faster, especially if the targets are kind of far apart, or somebody is very close to you. It just positions you a lot better to win those gunfights. So now let's go ahead and talk about recoil management. Earlier in the video, I talked about how Black Ops 4 and Modern Warfare both use predictive recoil. And the best part about predictive recoil is you can actually master a weapon by understanding the recoil pattern. And pretty much how it used to work before in the beginning of Call of Duty, you'd kind of have a general recoil pattern with a little bit of RNG thrown in. So it would swivel to the left and right and up, but in a general direction. But with predictive recoil, you're pretty much going to have the exact same recoil pattern every single time, with maybe a slight variation here and there. So there's actually a couple different things you can do to get ready for Modern Warfare. The number one thing is to use high recoil weapons, because at the end of the day, Modern Warfare is going to have some of the highest recoil weapons we've ever seen in Call of Duty. And as a result, it's going to be a little bit more demanding on being able to control those different recoils. So obviously, depending on what game you're playing, whether it's World War II, you're going to probably be using the WAF. If you're playing Black Ops 4, the Vapor's a good option, the VKM, as well as the Spitfire. So I also have two small bonus tips. The first one being that you should challenge yourself by using some of the weapons on the weaker end. If you can get better with weapons that aren't as good, when it comes to actually using the meta, you're just going to be significantly better. And that's always kind of a process that I've gone through When I start off in the game, I'm starting off using the meta weapons because obviously I'm going to do all the different camo challenges for those. Then it becomes a real grind to actually work on the quote-unquote bad weapons. And then by the time I've completed all those different camo challenges and started using the meta guns again, I've become a significantly better player. And the other little mini tip is if you're listening to your game audio through your TV, I would highly recommend getting a cheap pair of earbuds or headphones, because when it comes to Modern Warfare, the audio cues are huge and you're definitely going to want to make sure you take advantage of those. So I think we covered quite a bit in the video. Let me know down in the comments section which one of these was your favorite tip. And if you enjoyed the video in any way, please do me a favor and hit that like button. Let's see if we can get this video over 1,000 likes. If you're brand new to the channel, would like to find your way back for more Call of Duty content, make sure you do subscribe with notifications on. See y'all in the next one. Thank you for watching, and as always, have a great day.